Professor Greg Anderson is a professor here in the History Department, also the Graduate Studies Chair, and I might add, recently the recipient of the Alumni Distinguished Teaching Award, the highest accolade that this university gives for teaching. He teaches what some might say is the best field of history, ancient Greek history, but of course those people have not taken Roman history. But he is a graduate of that distinguished university to the east, Yale University, where he received his graduate degrees. And he will tell you about graduate studies in history here at Ohio State. So without further ado, please take it away.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you to Maria and Ray for organising this event and for having me here. I'll try not to bore the life out of you. First of all, just to be clear, I'm going to be talking mainly about PhD study as graduate study. MA study is really quite different in many ways. It's more of a kind of extension of the kinds of things you do already as an undergrad. Mostly MAs are instructional classes, courses or programs where you carry on taking courses. You may get to do a slightly longer thesis at the end of it than you would have done as an undergrad, but it's still more of an extension of what you've already been doing than a genuine break towards doing something new and different. And the PhD is a very different thing from an undergraduate program of study. So that's really what I'm going to be focusing on. I would also add before I start that I strongly encourage people to think about doing gap years, as it were, before going plunging in. Obviously, anyone contemplating graduate study, whether MA or PhD, you've already done at least probably 4 years, most of you, if not more, of an undergrad study. There are multiple reasons why it's good to take at least a year off to do something very different. I myself taught English as a foreign language for 2 years and ended up living in Japan. And it was actually, with all due respect to Yale, far more seminal in my intellectual development than the 6 years I spent in that rather pretentious place. You know, you don't have to teach English, but there's a lot of different things you can do. Like Ohio History Connection will be a wonderful thing if you can get a position there. It gives you a distance from your educational, academic track, so that you can see yourself, as it were, traveling forward and get a sense of what it is you really feel excited by. What is it you really want to do? Instead of just kind of getting on the next train that comes through the station, take some time off, leave the station, go somewhere totally different. You know, see yourself in a different environment, and by doing so, you will, you know, learn a lot about yourself and whether this sort of thing really is for you. All right, let me start by saying about the differences between undergrad and PhD study. PhD study is professional training. You're basically training to be one of us. That is, people who teach people like you. And this really involves two elements. One is that you are expected to acquire a professional level expertise in a field, whether it's early American history, modern American history, ancient Greek history, ancient Roman history, whatever it is. You have to be able, you will be examined on and expected to know the main details of an entire field. Because assuming you get through and do get a job at the end of it all, you will be teaching survey classes mostly. That'll be what your bread and butter courses will be, which require you to have that kind of broad field knowledge. The second thing is to acquire particular specialist knowledge of a particular area within that field. And that's generally the area where you will write your dissertation, and for many people, ever afterwards, the area for which they are known as being particular experts in. So let's say if I'm a Greek history guy, Athenian democracy might be my particular area of study, something like that. A big part of, but not by any means all of, Greek history. So really it's getting on top of those two things, the general field coverage and the specialist knowledge of a particular area within the field, are what you are going to the PhD program for. And there's a lot more self-direction involved in a PhD program than there is in an undergraduate program. Of course, all of you need to have motivations, you need to drive yourself to work when you don't feel like it and all of that. But at the PhD level, a lot of what you want to come out at the end of it knowing You are not required to know for any class. You've got to learn it for yourself because you want to know it, because you want to be that expert on that field. So if you don't feel that incredible kind of hunger, that curiosity for knowledge, to want to exhaustively know Roman history or something like that, then you really aren't in the right place, because that's what you've got to have. Yes, to a point, the courses you take while you're there will cover chunks of that field. But there are going to be loads of gaps. You've got to pass general exams in it. You'll do reading. You'll have reading lists along the way. And you've got to want to do it for yourself, really. You shouldn't need someone there to tell you. You're not being prodded all the time in the way undergrads are, where you're constantly given assignments, you have to respond. Here, yes, we give graduate students assignments, but they're not all of it by any means. A lot of it has to come from within. You need that kind of will to know, as it were. If you don't have that, then I'm not sure you'd be really comfortable in a PhD world. All right, practical things. Getting into a PhD program, if this is where you want to do. I'd say right up front, first of all, you really do have to get into, these days, particularly a strong program to have any realistic chance of getting a job as a professor at the end of it. And now what constitutes a strong program will vary from field to field. A lot will depend on the particular persons around who you can study with. Obviously, there's no point going to Harvard to study something if they don't have anybody there who is an expert in what you're doing. It's a great name, but of course it is. But if there's no one there for you to work with, to guide you in your studies, pointless going there. Go somewhere where there will be at least one person, if not ideally a few, who can guide you in the direction you want to go. But it should be somewhere that people have heard of. I mean, my own particular field, very traditional. It tends to be the very old, sort of crusty, famous places like the Ivy League, Stanford, Chicago, those kind of places where it's considered sort of prestigious, or Michigan, Berkeley, the very best public universities. Those are the ones that get you in. With other fields, it'll be somewhat different. But as a general rule of thumb, the Ivy Leagues are almost never a bad place to have a degree from, as we could certainly say the same for Chicago, Stanford, the other really well-known private research universities. Of course, the Big Ten universities, except Purdue, which I don't suppose has too many PhDs in history, or maybe it does, I don't know. But the Big Ten, Pac-10 type places, not just flagship universities that are research universities in states, but that are known for being good at doing history. So what are you looking for to get into such a place? I'll just give you a very brief guide to what we look for when we receive applicants to our program here. First of all, GPA. I'd say if you have less than a 3.75, then it's a little marginal. You've got to ideally be, these days, 3.75 to 4, I think, in that kind of range, to be really competitive for a PhD. GRE, we want to see, we don't give a crap about maths or anything like that, but verbal, we want to see 90%, 90% high. Verbs, as almost every speaker has said, speaking and writing are huge parts of what we do. So verbal ability is very, very important. And unfortunately, our university does give a crap about the math score and the whatever the other one is. For their own strange reasons. We hate it, but we don't have any choice. We have to go for it. But obviously, we ourselves care most about the verbal stuff. Courses, field background. Have as many courses under your belt in the general area, field area that you want to work in. If it's Greek history, take all the Greek history classes you possibly can before you go. Ideally, we'd like to see, I'd say, somewhere between 4, 5, and 10 classes already taken that are touching on, at least, the area that you're applying to study, the field area. Languages. Of course, if you're doing American history, this isn't such a problem. But almost anything else, other than maybe British history or, I don't know, Australian or Canadian history, languages are going to be a big part of it. You've got to see this coming, because let's say for ancient history, we expect people to have usually at least 3 years of Greek or Latin plus 2 years of the other one. So that's a lot of languages. Just to be doing it every year, you'd have to have started at the beginning of your sophomore year to get 3 years of language under your belt. Otherwise, you're going to go to a program and be spending way too much time doing the languages, instead of doing the history that you're actually there to do. So see it coming, and I would recommend, if you aren't going to have those languages, do consider doing a master's degree, a terminal master's somewhere, in a program that will allow you to acquire them while building further up your history resume, as it were. But do think about that. Letters of recommendation, it's never too soon to ingratiate yourself with faculty who will be effective letter writers. Always best to get letters from the faculty who've taught you at a higher level class rather than a lower level class, in a smaller rather than a larger class, for obvious reasons. They'll know you better. They'll be able to judge your abilities better. Obviously the closer they are to the field you're applying for, the better. Statement. Personal statement. What we don't really want to see the kind of undergrad personal statements where it's all about, you know, some flashing, blinding insight you had when you woke up one morning, and you know, those kinds of super personalized stories. I mean, we just, you know, that would actually help reject you from our pile. What we want to see is someone who is aware of what it takes to do well in a PhD program and has thought maturely about what is likely to happen once they come to Ohio State, while explaining to us why Ohio State would be a great place for them to do what they want to do, i.e. they already know Professor Rosenstein's here, or Professor Bracke, or Professor Sessa, or whoever it is, and these are the people who will be ideal for them when they get here. So it doesn't have to be super precise to the point that you're saying, and when I get there, I want to write my dissertation on and give a title. We don't want to see anything that precise, but we do want to see that you have a sense of what it's going to take to get through, and to show a kind of intellectual maturity that you have those basic sort of qualifications to get through it, as it were. Finally, writing sample. Again, please send something that's at least close to the area you want to be studying. I mean, I had an applicant this year who was he writing about Chuck Norris, some Chuck Norris movie from the 1980s, and he's writing to study ancient history. I mean, it was an interesting essay on an interesting topic, but it was so far away from what we do. How can I take that person seriously? I mean, please, it's obvious. You know, if you're applying to do ancient history, give us something on ancient history. If you happen to have done an undergrad thesis, and that's always a great idea if this is the direction you want to go in fact, I'd almost say it's necessary, because it'll itself show that you have already all of the necessary kind of inclinations and aptitudes for this. Use a chapter or section of your thesis as a writing sample. And there you need to show that you can engage with both, if it's something that requires foreign languages, you've got to show you can use them in that writing sample, and also engage with scholarship. Finally, really, is it for me? Well, I mean, do you have that passion? Do you have that calling? And do you have the kind of credentials which will allow you to succeed? Do you have the drive and determination? Talent gets you some of the way, but those of us who have graduate degrees all know too well that it wasn't always the most talented people who flourished the most. You've got to have certain extra levels of resourcefulness, drive, and determination, just such that no one is going to deny you this path in life that you want for yourself. Some people just don't have that necessary commitment, however bright they are. And a certain independence. You don't need to be told what to do. You can already see what you need to do and are willing to do it as far as possible for yourself. So I'll shut up, and if anyone has any questions, please do go ahead and ask. Yes?
I'm curious, how broad a survey are we looking here? Can I say, like, oh, I study 19th century Europe? Is that too narrow? Or
well, I mean, think about the classes you've taken here, and what those were like. Okay. So I'm guessing, most college jobs will require you to teach pretty broad survey classes. I mean, quite possibly if you're a US specialist, you will now and again at least have to teach a survey on the entirety of American history. It's quite possible. Now, no one's going to expect you to be expert on all of that, but certainly, yes, I'd say at least a century or so as your main sort of home field, as it were. And then within that, you can specialize in Jacksonian era, whatever it is, or something like that. That's sort of roughly what we'd be talking about. Okay? Good question. Any other questions?
No. Question, Rick. What percentage of the students you accepted this year already have an MA?
That's a good question, and I think the number has gone up over the years generally, wouldn't you say, Nate? I mean, it stands to reason that, again, people with MAs already show certain inclinations, they show certain abilities, and they're already, in a way, a little further along the path. So we're getting something closer to the finished product when they come. So there's less risk. It's more of a known quantity if we take people with MAs. So there's absolutely no reason not to consider doing one. It will, I think, more often than not be considered a stronger application, assuming you did well in the MA program, if you have one under your belt as well. It would, of course, boost your language background, it'll boost your course background as well. Why wouldn't we prefer to have someone who's taken 10 classes in the field, who's got an MA rather than 5, who's only got an undergrad degree? Maybe the undergrad has a slightly higher GPA, and sure, we do, I think this year, we may have even accepted someone who came straight from BA. Some people just come across as kind of amazing, you know, and but I think it's safer to have a master's degree as well. Good question.